Welcome to this ATA Insights webinar. Thank you for your ongoing interest and support of our webinar program. Today's session will begin in 2 minutes. ATA Insights Webinars is an online platform for the dissemination of professional renewable energy knowledge across international borders. Our aim is to democratize access to information, for innovation to spread faster, and to make the industry more competitive. And we do this through our online sessions, open to all our members. Every year we do more than 100 sessions with over 250 speakers, 50,000 attendees from more than 50 countries. To participate in the session today, use the chat on the right-hand side to introduce yourself, your company, and where you're joining from. Under the screen, you will find the Q&A box, where you can send your questions for the speakers. We will get to as many as we can today. We're recording this session, and we will send you a link to the materials in a few days. Please consider supporting our content creation for the webinar program. Contact us on the email on screen.
Okay, hello and welcome to this session. I'm super glad to be in this session because we're going to finally talk about the Spanish Csp tenders. And in order to do so with the full range of representatives in the supply chain, today we'll have people for the R&D Csp sector, also for the technical/EPC companies, and also the owner of the assets. First of all, let me introduce our 3 panelists of today. The first one is Eduardo Zarza. He's the head of the R&D unit in the line-focused concentrating solar systems at Plataforma Solar de Almería. The PSA is probably one of the largest R&D centers for CSP in the world. Eduardo himself, he's more than 35 years of experience in CST, and also he has been the coordinator and director of many R&D projects. Also, he's chair of one of the most influential forums CSP, which is the Solar Basis, and also he's the scientific advisor to the European CSP Association, which is Stella. Eduardo, welcome. You are on mute.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo, for this kind introduction. Good afternoon to everybody. It's a real pleasure to be with you in this interesting webinar about the current tender for 200 megawatts of solar thermal power plants in Spain. As you said, I'm working at the PSA. I have in my background a nice aerial view of our facilities. PSA is at the south of Spain, and it's the largest R&D center devoted to concentrating solar thermal systems. We have been in close collaboration with the industry from the very beginning. This R&D center is now 40-year-old, and we would like to continue with this successful collaboration with the industrial sector for a medium and also long term.
Thank you, Eduardo. Also, we have today Oliver Baudson. He's the managing director of Csp Plans in Germany. And they are a company that they have been in the sector for more than 30 years. Oliver himself has been in the CSP business for more than 10. And together with its headquarters in TSK in Gijón, northern Spain, they are involved in developing, designing, and implementing many CSP plans and solutions. Actually, one of the core solutions of TSK Plans is the use of CSP plus PV as an hybrid technology. But also, they are developing solutions with other CSP-based technologies, such as the use of hydrogen or other derivatives, such as methanol or ammonia. So, Oliver, please.
Thank you, Gonzalo, and good afternoon, everybody in the chat or in the webinar. As mentioned, TSK Flaxol in Germany is an actor since more than 30 years in the CSP market. And as such, we have under 10 years back, under the shareholding of Solar Millennium still, implemented the first power plant in Spain with a molten salt test. And today, being part of TSK group in Spain, we have together with a group implemented 1 gigawatt out of totally 6 gigawatt worldwide. So we have an interesting market share and range certainly among the leading technology companies for CSP topics. So our group has around 1,000 people realizing total volume of 1 billion euros annually. And so we want to try to use this asset to further develop the CSP market. One aspect of that is our engagement in R&D activities, driven also largely from the subsidiary in Cologne, looking into molten salt solutions also for linear systems, looking into alternative oils with higher temperature capabilities and lower degradation effects. So we are trying to deploy molten salt storage systems also outside the solar business for the conversion, for instance, of coal-fired power plants into big storages. As mentioned by Gonzalo, we were working strongly on the integration of CSP with PV to have intelligent hybrids, not only the simply co-located ones, with better overall efficiency and lower LCOE. And one of our most recent activities is to deploy this kind of hybrid power plants for the production of green energy and derivatives, going downstream to the ammonia production and even to the green methanol production. So it's a pleasure also for me to join this afternoon, this webinar, and I'm looking forward to the further discussion.
Thank you, Oliver. And finally, Pablo Picazo. Pablo is the head of operation in Iberia for Cubico Sustainable Investments. Pablo has more than 15 years of experience into the CSP industry. Actually, he started with the commissioning of the first 2 parabolic trough CSP plants in Spain, which are Andasol 1 and 2. And now he's managing a portfolio of 5 CSP plants in operation. Pablo works for Cubico. Cubico was founded 7 years ago in 2015, and is one of the largest private owned renewable energy providers. You have present in more than 12 countries and a portfolio of around 3 gigas, with another 2 in construction and development. So Pablo and Cubico would be is the last step in the supply chain, and he's representing today the ownership side of the CSP plant. Pablo, very welcome.
Hello. Thank you for the introduction, Gonzalo. It's a pleasure joining this panel. It's true that Cubico is based worldwide. Cubico has presence in 12 countries, and we are operating plants with all technologies. But of course, in Spain, our main technology is the CSP. We have 5 plants, as you said, and the presence in Cubico in Spain is very linked, no, to the CSP, because the first acquisition was Andasol, as you explained 5 years ago. After Andasol, we acquired Arenales, Moron, and Olivenza, and our idea is keep growing in Spain and in CSP. So this auction or this tender is a great opportunity for us. We think that we are very well positioned, and we think that we can keep this growing path in the short term, no, trying to increase our CSP portfolio. It's an industry that we trust, and I think we can develop our knowledge, no, in this industry.
Thank you, Pablo. And also very welcome to all the attendees. I'm reading the chat. We'll have people from Chile, Brazil, US, South Africa, Tunisia, many countries worldwide. So it's a real pleasure to welcome all of you. Just for you to know, this is going to be a very dynamic session. So at any time, please feel free to drop a question. There is a Q&A box into your platform. I will be managing those questions, and as I said, don't hesitate and don't wait until the end of the session. Just feel free to drop your question at any time. Okay, so let's talk about business. As I said at the beginning, finally, Spain has announced the Csp tenders. A very important remark is that we have a draft. We haven't seen yet, because it's not yet published, the official tender. Normally, from the draft to the official tender, might be some changes, but the bulk of the tender is going to be very similar, or should be very similar to the draft. For all of you that are not aware with the Csp tenders in Spain, it's going to be the first time in our history, that we are having a Csp tender. We already have almost 50 plants in Spain, but they weren't allocated via tender. It was a different scheme back in the 2010, even a little bit earlier. And this tender is going to be based on price. Many other tenders worldwide include other parameters, such as local content and some other parameters. For the Spanish tender, it's going to be just price. And this is the only driver to be awarded or not. A very important remark, there is no CSP restriction. So we could see parabolic trough, we could see molten salt tower, any other kind of tower, we could see Fresnel, anything. There is no limitation on the CSP technology. The only requirement into the CSP fraction is to have at least 6 hours of storage at full capacity. I said CSP fraction because the big change for this tender is that you are going to be allowed to use either PV or biomass with your CSP plant. And the idea of this is to use the most of each technology, so at the end you get the most competitive product. And finally, this tender is a bit different from other tenders worldwide because you do not get a tariff during a specific period. You are actually bidding for an amount of energy. This energy is roughly what your plant is going to generate in 20 years. But if you start producing, let's say, more than expected, you could, let's say, consume or reach that energy in year 18 or 19. Afterwards, you just go to the electricity market. So let's start with Eduardo as the most senior voice today in this panel. Eduardo, what are your views about these technical changes, specifically about this PV or biomass hybridization? What is your view from the technical point of view?
Thank you, Gonzalo. To be frank, I'm very happy. I'm very happy with the possibility to install hybrid plants with PV and CSP technology, because I think that this hybrid plant is nowadays an excellent way to achieve a high penetration of renewable energies into the electricity market, provided that both technologies are combined properly within the hybrid plant. So the high complementarity between PV and CSP, I think, is out of doubt. I think that there is no doubt about this complementarity. We can produce cheap electricity with PV during sunlight hours, and we can produce green dispatchable electricity overnight with the CSP plant. Therefore, I think this hybridization, the use of hybrid plants, PV and CSP, is an excellent option to achieve the objective to have a fully renewable electricity market at affordable cost. I see another additional advantage for the hybrid plants, because if we install PV plants and CSP plants separately, the management of the electricity grid would be a bit more complex, a bit more difficult than with hybrid plants. Why? Because the hybrid plant will have a single owner, and this owner will be able to offer electricity around the clock at a quite affordable cost, combining both technologies, PV and CSP. And another significant benefit of this hybrid plant is that we can optimize the use of the access point to the grid. The access point to the grid is an issue in Spain because there is a lack of access points to the grid. And with the installation of hybrid plants at the same, because we have both technologies at the same access point, we can optimize the use of the access point that are currently available in Spain. So I only see benefits from this hybridization. So this is why I'm quite happy.
Great, great. Pablo, because you got a 5 CSP plant portfolio, none of them with PV, because as of today, we don't have in Spain any PV plus CSP plants. How do you assess this change from the owner's perspective?
I totally agree with Eduardo. No? This hybridization helps to reduce the LCOE of the project itself, because with the same connection point, you can use the PV during the day and the CSP during the night. You can decarbonize the night production, so you can be more independent, and the cost of the production from the sun as today is cheaper from the natural gas, as we can see in the international markets, with no CO2 implications, or at least nothing. So I think from an economic point of view, is much more efficient. From a technological point of view, is completely the same. If you have two different plants, you have 2,000, 2,200 equivalent hours of a PV, and then you have another 2,000, 2,500 of a CSP. If you use the same connection point, you end up with a 4,000, 500,000 equivalent hours project in the same connection point. No? So for the grid perspective and for the stability of the grid perspective, it's much better, no? In order to ensure a constant and a constant supply of electricity. Actually, these plants are enforced to increase the storage because, as you said, this 6 hours minimum, it's a minimum, but once you put more and more, it makes more and more profitable, because the bigger the better. In this case, I totally agree that if we go for this kind of plants, we should be as big as possible. So as today, we are thinking that maybe the optimal plant is in the region for 100 megs of CSP with 100 megs of PV with the biggest storage as possible. That would end up a massive equivalent hours for the same connection points with the lowest LCOE. No? So we can improve all the angles of the investment. And finally, this add-on in comparison with the current portfolio, as you said, Gonzalo, we don't have any hybrid plant as today, CSP and PV. The hybridization doesn't add any complexity. You are, in the case of the biomass, maybe you can have certain complexity, another power block, another power plant, but in this case, if you add up a PV plant during the day, the complexity in both operation and maintenance and project management is not that big, no? And as Eduardo says, the capex of the PV portion is very, very insignificant, let's say, compared to the big investment, no? So with a small additional effort, you can optimize a lot the project itself.
Thank you, Pablo. Before we go deeper into the Spanish case, I also would like to remark that the CSP market is becoming, there is a movement into the CSP market. Late last year, we saw tenders in Chile for dispatchable energy, and also in China. Actually, in China, they were awarded a few plants, CSP plants, actually 5. And last week, we saw the last tender in Botswana for 200 megawatts. Oliver, how do you compare the Spanish opportunity versus this other market that they are also having tenders?
Well, generally speaking, I would say we have to make an exception with regards to the Chinese market, which is, in our view, a completely closed market, at least for EPC contractors. So the Chinese market is built by Chinese, and maybe where they have lacks of technological savoir-faire, they will ask Spanish, German, international companies to complete, but that is not really a market. That is Chinese, closed, and unfortunately we, as Europeans or Western companies, cannot largely enter into that. So with Chile, Botswana, and other markets, we, from a EPC contractor's point of view, or technology provider's point of view, we have to say we are and we have to be flexible to go to where the projects are. So actually, we have realized CSP plans around the world. Of course, in Spain, the majority of our plans has been realized in Spain, but also Morocco, Egypt, South Africa, Ashalim, USA, Kuwait. Of course, Spain is a home market, and for a Spanish company or European company. And in Spain, certainly for project implementation, logistics are facilitated, which is reducing risk and consequently has financial impacts, making projects cheaper in total. In contrast to these advantages, maybe compared to these other countries, particularly Chile, irradiation issues might be worse and not so attractive. But if you take into account the total picture, I think the preferential conditions, frame conditions in a European country such as Spain, regarding the political context, the regulatory framework, and also the resulting commercial conditions make it very attractive to do projects in Spain. Unfortunately, also we highly appreciate that there is new activity and that there is now this auction process going on and starting off. Project volume with 200 megawatt each 2 years is not yet building a market and will force us to go abroad into also conditions with less favorable frameworks. But in the end, of course, if we would have once to take a decision in a market where we have the opportunity to select to do the cherry picking, Spanish projects for the before mentioned reasons would be preferred, of course. So the Spanish market is attractive, and we very much hope that the very good development of the current tender will be pursued, and that possibly lacking conditions or suboptimal conditions set forth today can be improved step by step, and making CSP and also CSP PV technologies a success story, a new success story in Spain, as a CSP 10 years back was a very great success story. So we hope that this auction process will contribute to rebuild the market here in this regard.
That's very interesting what you're saying about the Spanish political context, because one thing is to build the plant, but a different business is to keep it for 20 years. So Pablo, we said Cubico is in 12 countries already. How do you assess these other opportunities, Chile, China, Botswana, compared to the Spanish case?
Well, most of those countries are not target countries for Cubico as today. There are some requirements and some process to be a target country for Cubico to invest in. Spain it is. Spain has a certain country risk, environmental, economic environment, legal framework, financial liquidity, and more important for this particular industry, a lot of know-how, a lot of operational plans, and a fantastic track record on development this kind of projects. Actually, we trust that this auction or this tender is going to be a test, and the 200 megs that are scheduled every 2 years is only a minimum that in the next opportunity would be overpassed. No? If there is enough appetite in this tender and the projects are feasible and the price that the auction is giving is attractive for the ministry, we hope that the second auction and the second tender would give a higher volume, no, than the 200, and probably we can meet further investment requirements, not all in renewables at all. In the PNIEC, the target for the CSP would be met in the following years. So we think that Spain as today is a unique opportunity to invest in CSP, and of course, from our point of view, we have local presence, we have know-how, we have more plans, and we think we are very good position in the market with the EPC contractors, with developers, etc. So for us, it's a fantastic opportunity.
That's important, because you mentioned the financial aspects. In the draft, we saw that the CSP tender may happen early April. It is true that we don't have yet the final date, and may or may not be postponed. How do you feel about this early April date? Is it that feasible for companies like yours to actually present a bid and be part of the tender?
It's very tight. It's very tight. Not only this April, the problem or the issue is not to be ready or not this April. It's the 4 years, no, deadline to have the COD and to keep the option rights. No, I think that a project from scratch is extremely tight, because we know that a normal development could take between 1 and 2 years, depending on the complexity of the project, and the construction could take more than 2 years, 2 years, 2 years and a half, maybe 3 years if the project is very complex. No, so we can end up in a range between low 4s, 5 years in the case of a project from scratch. So for this first tender, we guess that the better position projects would be bidding for this auction, and the other projects that could be remain, let's say, waiting until the outcome of this auction will go into the next one. That the final buffer, no, the final term beginning now would be at least 5 years instead of 4. So I think that the calendar would be enough for a project with certain level of development, mid stage of development, but for an early stage development, maybe it's too tight.
Mm-hmm. And Eduardo, we said at the beginning that there is no technical restriction to the CSP fraction. From your point of view, what do you think is more likely to be awarded? Are we going to see more parabolic draft? We're going to see new towers, or a mix of the two?
Well, I have been asked many times similar questions concerning parabolic draft and tower systems. For me, this comparison between parabolic draft or tower is quite similar, somehow similar to the comparison between diesel and gasoline engines. So both technologies are there, both technologies are working properly. So I think something similar happens with parabolic draft collectors and tower systems. So depending on the specific requirement or the specific characteristics of each project, and depending on the criteria of the promoter can choose one technology or the other technology. But I don't see a solid argument to say that only one technology will be chosen for this auction, because both technologies are in a good and similar stage of technical development, and both technologies can perform in a good and efficient manner. So I don't see a winner. I mean, I see that there are two technologies, both of them are fully valid, and the promoters will choose, the technology that they will use for their projects?
One of the things, still with the technical side, is that we said it's a 6-hour storage. We are receiving a few questions from the Q&A, for example, about this 6-hour storage. Some people are asking if that is not enough to overcome or to supply the whole night. I mean, what are your views about this number of 6 hours? If too much, too little, it's enough? How do we compare this thermal storage with batteries?
Well, I think there are two different questions. One question concerning the capacity of the storage, and the second part of your question is related to the comparison between batteries and thermal energy storage. Concerning the first part of your question, I think that 6 hours is too little. I think that 6 hours could be enough if the CSP plant is forced to produce a significant fraction of electricity overnight. If this is not imposed by the rules of the tenders, I think that with only 6 hours of thermal energy storage, most of the electricity will be produced during sunlight hours. If there is not a clear message to the plant owners that the real target of the solar thermal electricity should be the overnight electricity demand. So I already said at the beginning that there is an excellent complementarity between photovoltaic and solar thermal electricity. Photovoltaic to meet the demand during sunlight hours, and CSP should be designed to meet the electricity demand overnight. So this is why I would have increased the capacity of the thermal energy storage up to 9 hours. Because if we don't give the clear message to the promoters that CSP should be focused on night production of green electricity, I think that a significant fraction of the electricity generated by the CS plant will be delivered during sunlight hours. And I don't think this is the right way to go. Concerning the second part of your question, batteries or thermal storage, my opinion is that batteries are an affordable, a good option for small capacity storage system of electricity, while thermal energy storage are more profitable, are a better option for large capacity system. So we see that nowadays the specific cost of batteries is much higher than the specific cost of thermal energy storage system. Even if we take into account let's say the efficiency when converting thermal energy from the storage into electricity, we come to a clear conclusion that thermal energy storage is a better option than battery nowadays for large capacity systems, storage system. And I think the situation will not change in many years. It could change in a long term, but not in a short to medium term.
Okay, I'm going to also to raise some of the questions, technical questions we are receiving. One of them is about if PV is limited in any way to this hybrid plant. Just for you to know, we are waiting for the final wording of the tender. In the draft, is limited to 50% of the installed capacity. So the limit would be 50 PV and 50 CSP. And also there was another question about how is CSP defined by the tender in regard of how the government is going to check that you are actually installing CSP and not just PV with thermal storage, for example. Well, the response is a little bit would require more time, but in short, the Spanish regulation defines what is CSP and what is PV. For the case of CSP, is to generate electricity just using the thermal capacities of the sun. So in practical terms, what the government is going to do is that before you get the authorization of your plant, they are going to check your CSP turbine, and they will check that you actually have the thermal storage system and the solar field. The 6 hours, because some people was asking, are measured in terms of energy. So your thermal storage system must be enough to generate 6 hours at your nominal capacity. But now, Oliver, let's go to the tricky and difficult questions. The price. We know, I mean, everybody has in mind the benchmark of Dubai, which is $74 per megawatt hour. And that has been super announced worldwide. It's the cheapest up to date. Of course, we acknowledge there are significant differences between Dubai and the Spanish case, mainly two, mainly three, I would say. The size of the plant. In Dubai, we will have a 700 megawatts. In Spain, we will see 200 or smaller plants. Also, the duration of the tariff in Dubai is 35 years compared to this less than 20 in Spain. And also the cost of the capital cost for the project. But still, what is your impression, or which ranges of prices do you think we may see in Spain?
Well, that is really a tricky and complex question, and I have certainly to elaborate a little bit larger on that. You were mentioning this great benchmark of Dubai project with 74 euros per megawatt hour, which is setting indeed a benchmark, and the entire CSP sector has to take care for repeating that or coming at least close to that. What is a challenge and what is good? That is a challenge. And we are already seeing, if we observe the worldwide market, good signs that this is possible to be repeated. And on the other hand, we have to be very careful when looking at these figures which are published, also in the case of Dubai. You mentioned these particular conditions, which do not apply all around the world, and which then in other places lead to higher prices. And particularly CSP technologies undergo a lot of more influences than other renewable technologies. Unlike, for instance, PV and wind, where the major cost driver is in the equipment, which, by the way, can be produced in nice, controlled, clean room atmospheres, and then be brought to the site and be installed in a, I exaggerate a little bit, in a kind of plug and play mode on the site in a very short time. Unlike these technologies, CSP or CSP projects, the complexity is transferred onto the site. And this makes clear why CSP pricing and costing depends so largely on project-specific and site-specific aspects. That is very important to understand when talking about prices. And another strong price impact results also from functionality of the plant. So do we have a plant which is not equipped with a storage, having a very low capacity factor, or do we have operational concept which requires close to 24/7 operation with an extremely high capacity factor? That has also influence on the pricing. How big is the test? How many full load hours do we achieve? And in this context, in the context of functionality, I have here, before going to the price, I come to that. I have to reiterate my statement, which I put already in many places before. CSP is not a competitor of PV or of wind. CSP technology presents a chance to complete and to complement these wonderful cheap technologies in costing, but with a disadvantage of having lags in flexibility. And together we can build systems which bring competitiveness and flexibility at once. Our competitors are not the renewable energies. Our competitors are gas and coal. And by functionality and even competitive-wise on price level, we see nowadays that we can easily compete with these technologies, having PPA prices 8 to 10 euro cent, and we have proven in projects that we can undergo that level. So now coming to more cost figures. We have seen the Dubai project. We certainly have learned, all of you have learned about the Chile projects, where using a hybrid approach, prices between 30 and 40 US dollar per megawatt hour could be achieved. We can also refer to our own project, which we have prepared for Morocco together with EDF and Master, where we could finally present a bid of 60 euros per megawatt hour, which is also very attractive, with 5 hours of storage in this case. So in a nutshell, we believe that in principle, if you have the total degree of freedom to define size and design of the plant, these hybrid approaches can come to price level between 30 and 60 euros per megawatt hour in the near future. But these figures depend largely on location, on functionality, capacity factor, test size, and the freedom of designers to really go for integrated optimization, to put the right ratio between CSP and PV, and install electrical heaters and the right turbine size and so on and so forth. So I do not believe that we can, in this first round of the Spanish auctions, can come down to these levels. Yeah. So I still see some limitations. We have a good, but not the very best irradiation in Spain. We may have many cases where we go into brownfield operation, which has also a specific cost to be considered. We have here in the tender given limitation of annual production hours, which is a limitation in turning down the costs. We have this limitation of test and capacity. That means the sweet spot, according to our calculations and estimates, is largely beyond 100 megawatts in one plant, 150, 200, or even beyond. So, but here we are limited to lower capacities. So I hardly believe that we can come here for most of the cases below a 10 euro cent level per kilowatt hour, and therefore I would really give my recommendation to the designers of the regulation to get started in this very first auction process in order to have big learning effects, to set ceiling prices not below 15 euro cent per kilowatt hour. And then let's learn, let's see the bids, and then we can adapt it accordingly. And we have to be careful, otherwise we will destroy the market before it is getting started. That's my personal view on that.
Let's add a new variable to your cocktail of variable that you have for the price. all the raw materials, components, costs are increasing nowadays due to this global context. Do you expect the bids are going to be affected in any way by this new reality of shortage supplies or raw material cost increases? What are your views?
Yeah, this is a very crucial point and a very important question. Thank you for reminding me on that. I have tried to eliminate that from my presence. Actually, we are suffering a lot in our running projects due to these price increases. You know, as an EPC contractor, you usually have to enter lump sum turnkey contracts and with fixed prices without escalations, and we are seeing, particularly in transport sector, multiplications or increases by a factor of 5, 6 in cost, and we see it also in raw materials. So that is really, we are suffering from that, and we are really struggling to set up a strategy for our future biddings because we cannot use the current market prices to go for bids. Then we would triple, we would certainly double the prices. Yeah? So we have to find the right way in anticipating future price decreases. It will certainly not go back to pre-corona situation so quickly, but it is certainly not possible to set up bids on the current price levels. That would kill everything. And this will mean that we as an EPC contractor have to find solutions together with our clients in order to share the related risk. It is not possible that in future times the IPPs and the banks and the international finance institutions burden the EPCs alone with all the price risk in this volatile context we are facing right now.
Mm-hmm. And Eduardo, we were mentioned at the beginning that the Spanish national plan is to reach 5 gigawatts of CSP in the year 2030. However, this first tender is only 200 megawatts. Somehow, what do you think? I mean, how far are we going to reach that goal of 5 gigawatts? Do you expect this tender to be increased in the near future?
Well, I think that 200 megawatt is too little. It's too little, and I expect that the power limit will be increased for next auctions. I think that 200 megawatt is too little for two reasons, mainly two reasons. First of all, because the total goal, the final goal of new CSP plant in Spain, defined in the National Plan for Energy and Environment, is 5 gigawatt, 5,000 megawatt. Such a target is defined by 2030. So if we now install only 200 megawatt, it means that we'll have to install 4,800 megawatts in only 8 years. So I have serious doubts about the real impact of this auction to fulfill the main goal of 5 gigawatt of additional CSP plant in 2030. So I think 200 megawatt is too little. The second reason is because with 200 megawatt, we can only install a very small number of plants, And I think that at present, we should check under real operating solar conditions, many different options in order to find the optimum option for the Spanish market. But with only 200 megawatts, I think that only 2 or 3 plants could be finally approved. And I think this is not what we need now for the commercial development of this technology.
Thank you, Eduardo. And also, Pablo, That's something I would like to ask you, because you've got operating CSP plants right now in Spain with no storage. We have been talking a lot about maximizing the use of the access to the grid access to the grid access. Somehow, do you foresee any way to install another CSP plant next to an existing plant? The existing plant with no storage, the new one with 6 or even more hours of storage. So somehow the two CSP plants are producing day and night?
Absolutely, it's one of the options we are analyzing. We have 2 plants without storage, and you explained it perfectly. No, it's the same from a new plant that during the day would use the PV. Now during the day would use the existing plant, no, and in those day hours, the new plant or the plant extension would be gathering the thermal energy, storing it, and when the sun set or when the original plant shut down, the new plant would begin dispatching the electricity. This is an absolutely real possibility. Actually, we are exploring, because sometimes you have the grid connection, of course, you're very well positioned to get plots, to get lands nearby, or even better, to open the fence and have one big complex, bringing all the operational synergies that you could imagine, sharing control rooms, sharing the teams, etc. Most of the industry and environmental permitting process was already granted some years ago. So now we have only to update or recap the papers we did at that time. So we think that the process would be much smoother, no? Than going from a new plant from scratch. And with the volume of the auction, as Eduardo said, 200 megs would be a mix between 2 big plants, or maybe it's 1 big plant and a couple of smaller plants that could be a plant extension of the current ones. So of course it's a possibility.
Also, going deeper into potential investors or bidders, as we know, this tender is open to companies worldwide, so any company could participate into the Spanish tender. What do you expect about these foreign companies, not the technical providers, but like potential bidders or investors? Do you foresee, for example, Chinese companies coming here and building plants, or Saudi Arabian companies, or do you expect foreign investors to come to Spain?
Why not? I haven't had contact with them, so I don't know how really keen are on these opportunities. Of course, I know that tech technologists are very active worldwide, but I don't know if they finally would make a step further, no, going into the auction as a developer. Honestly, I don't know. For sure, I think that the local companies, historical EPC contractor, historical developers, maybe utilities, and new owners, new age owners of CSP plants can join this action, but I don't have such visibility in international developers.
Okay, thank you, Pablo. Oliver, Eduardo said, and also Pablo, that with these 200 megawatts, we may see maybe a couple of big plants, 1 big and 2 smaller. What are your thoughts of this? How many plants do you think we're going to see?
Well, unfortunately, I have not my crystal ball with me today, so it's difficult. But I think I fully agree with Eduardo and Pablo that for getting a big start of and a quick start of the auction volume is still too small, and the bidders have to also take tactical considerations into account in order to bid. So I believe not too many bidders will go for the big portion. Maybe we have 1, maximum 2 bids in a size of 100 megawatt, which is the upper limit per bidder, as I understand it. And I can imagine that most of the bidders, having already their facilities running and connection points for 50 megawatt, will try to build around that concept a new proposal for this auction and make use of that. Yeah, for instance, introducing a thermal energy storage for plants which do not have one yet, or adding some PV in order to get a kind of initial hybridization into the system. So I believe the larger part of proposals will be between 50 and 100 megas, and I do not believe at all that smaller plants will be proposed into the bidding process.
And Eduardo, we have been discussing a lot about these PV potential hybrid plants. Do you expect any other technical improvement into the product compared to the existing plant that we have in Spain?
Well, I don't expect a single major improvement. I expect a set of improvements that altogether will significantly increase the performance and the reliability of the plants, because during the last 10-15 years, many improvement has been identified in commercial plants under operation. So now there are improvements for parabolic trough collectors, there are improvements for heliostats, there are also improvements for receivers, for operation and maintenance strategies. So I think that what we'll see in the new plant is a set of improvements compared with the current plant, instead of a single major improvement.
Understood. Thank you. And now let's say broader our views a little bit, and let's discuss just for the final block the impact of these tenders into the Spanish market. We have been discussing a lot about how they're going to be designed, but let's go what is going to be the impact, in the long-term impact into the Spanish market. Oliver, first of all, when we are going to see this new plant online?
You are referring to potential implementation times, yeah. Let's say if we keep the schedule 6th of April as a starting point, I think there is not so much difference in the implementation speed compared to the time when the existing CSP fleet of Spain had been built. So that means if you have let's say a project size of 50 megawatts, yeah, adding capacities to the grid, so that this has a implementation time of 20-24 months. And for instance, if we go to really big plants, as we wanted to implement in Morocco for the middle project, that would have taken 33 months. So it largely depends, in my view, on the scope, whether you just introduce some additional loops, or if you add a TES, or if you add electrical heaters with PV. So my feeling would be that typical implementation times for these projects being bid in the upcoming auction will be between 20 and maximum 30 months. In particular cases, it might be shorter, faster. I don't believe so much, and it could be longer, but I think the very big projects will not be bid in here. So 20, 30 months, that should be the typical horizon to implement these projects.
Mm-hmm. And Pablo, Oliver was mentioning before that let's say the competitor of CSP is not PV, it's actually the fossil fuels. Spain is in the phase away stage of leaving behind fossil fuel plants. Actually, we were comparing the cost of CSP not with PV, but with fossil fuel plants. how do you think these CSP, once they start to get into the system, are going to affect our electricity prices?
Well, versus today's prices, it's going to be cheaper, I think. But today's prices maybe is a peak, no? It's a bad momentum to compare, but in the region of the 200s that we are seeing every day, I think that the CSP price could beat that reference, no? In long-term view, of course, PV is and wind is impossible to be beaten. We cannot reach never the price of PV and wind, but on the other hand, the CSP can produce during the night, no? And I think is what we have to look for, no? The night decarbonization, to give also the grid stability that the system don't have with the PV, and the dispatchability, no? The optionality of and flexibility of the CSP to be produced when required. This is something that all the industry has been working on in order to be available for the grid operator to dispatch the electricity for our storage when required, no? So altogether, I think it brings a final, let's say, average price or blended price in line or even better than a fossil generation, no? When you have to pay for the fuel, of course, and now with the CO2 rights. So by far, I think the CSP well focus can beat these fuel references.
Thank you, Pablo.
If I may add on that, Gonzalo, I think the impact, the positive impact of CSP integration is not only a costs matter, it is also a matter of system impact, meaning that CSP integration, intelligent smart CSP integration may allow and will allow the further increase of volatile renewable energies at attractive price levels. And so the entire system can have a higher renewable energy share at still competitive prices with reduced curtailment and with reduced dumping, and thus building up, depending on the site and location in the world, up to 100% of renewables at affordable cost. And there has recently been published a study for Portugal proving that CSP integration has these positive impacts on price and system stability. And I very much believe that this is a major contribution CSP will have in future.
Thank you, Oliver. And Eduardo, I mean, you have been working in R&D for many, many years. Let me ask you a question about R&D. We haven't said anything about hydrogen. Where is hydrogen, or how hydrogen is going to fit into all of this? Do you think that CSP with thermal storage may be deployed to produce green hydrogen, I mean, or what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that it's very important to keep in mind that technical feasibility and commercial profitability are not the same concepts, because we may have something that is technically feasible, but not profitable from a commercial standpoint. So if you ask me about the possibility to produce renewable energy with CSP and thermal energy storage, I should say yes, it's technically feasible, no problem. We can use solar thermal electricity to produce hydrogen, but at the same time, I should say that I don't think this is an efficient use for solar thermal electricity, because we have to convert thermal energy into electricity. Then we have to use the electricity to produce green hydrogen, and then we'll produce thermal energy with the hydrogen. So the whole process is not efficient at all. So I think that PV and wind electricity should be used for green hydrogen, especially the curtailments. The curtailment should be used to produce green hydrogen instead of solar thermal electricity. because from a thermodynamic standpoint, the whole process is not efficient at all.
Thank you. I think during this session, we have been providing responses to all of, or most of the questions. I don't know if any of the attendees of the public has any further question. We still have another 5 to 6 minutes before we end. So meanwhile, we receive more questions. I would like the three of you to give us your final remark and let's say hopes for this tender that's going to happen. So Eduardo, you go first.
Well, for me, the main characteristic for this of this tender, of this auction, is the possibility to install hybrid plants. I think this is very good news because I have always pointed out that the combination of PV and solar thermal electricity is an excellent way. It's a very good option to deliver green electricity around the clock. And in this auction, we have this possibility. We have the possibility to design and install hybrid plants, putting together PV and solar thermal electricity. On the other hand, the total power for this auction is too little, 200 megawatt. I think this is a barrier for the development of the Csp technology. I hope the authorities will take this into account and will increase the power for next auctions, because otherwise the target of 5 additional gigawatt of solar thermal power at the end of this decade in 2030 will not be achieved at all.
So Eduardo, we have just received a question from the public to you. Is there any innovation in high temperature alloys, and do you expect any innovation to be presented in new CSP power plants? You have partially replied this in your previous intervention. I don't know if you want to add anything further.
No, I don't expect a significant improvement concerning raw materials for high temperature components. For instance, the receiver in tower systems. So I don't expect significant improvement concerning the raw material for the receiver. I expect some improvement concerning the overall design of the receiver, and also about the operation strategy and the aiming strategy with the heliostat field to guarantee the durability of the receiver.
Thank you, Eduardo. Also, Oliver, just your final wrap-up and wishes list to the government for this tender.
Actually, my thoughts and my conclusions are quite close to those of Eduardo. Actually, I see this opportunity and this auction process as a very good movement. It's very smart from the Spanish government to revive this sector. The first auction with 200 megawatt can be seen as a test case, and also the published conditions, hopefully, which will be revised at least partly, can help learning and preparing for future auctions. But I also agree with Eduardo that in future we have to increase the capacity, the volume of per auction, in order to attract more innovation, to attract more bidders, and to make even the bidding more intense, and to drive the costs down. Where I, by the way, not so much in line with Eduardo is the use of CSP PV hybrid systems for green hydrogen derivatives. Not for hydrogen, there I'm in line with Eduardo, but I see there a big potential. We are working on concepts, and I invite you for personal discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Oliver. Finally, Pablo, what is your final remark?
my wishes, as you said, no, my wishes are, I think, I clear, no. The first one is that this auction is fully awarded, that at least or in excess 200 megawatts are awarded, so we can have 2, 3, or 4 new CSP plans jointly with the awareness of these new plans. If the government publishes a higher volume for the next one, and we have the trust that the next auction to be held next year, instead of 200 megs, is 5, 6, 7, 800 of a gig, would be very well recognized by the industry, by the sector, and more developers would show appetite, so the industry can grow. And for sure, the LCOE would decrease. No, one, you put more and more technology CPC contractor and developers in competition, the price would keep raising. No, and finally, that the outcome of this auction sets a price that is both affordable by the system, so we can keep reducing the cost of the electricity system, mostly during the night, but on the other hand, it's a good outcome. So it brings a good return for the investor. Not so we have not to squeeze the returns of the final investor to be on the market and to keep the appetite for the industry. No, so those would be my wishes for this auction.
Thank you, Pablo, and thank you, the three of this very interesting panel today. Just two final remarks for the more than 100 attendees that we got today. First, all of this has been based on the draft of the tender. We don't have yet the final wording. We expect it's going to be we expect it very shortly, in a matter of weeks, I would say. And second, all of you will receive the link to this recorded discussion, so you can always review what we have been discussing today. And me, myself, I'm sure the three or the four of us here today, I'm more than available to reply to any question that you may have by email. So thank you, everybody. That's all for today.
Okay.